Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. And as you can see in the studio, I have a guest. We have David Kurten from the Heritage Party. Hello, David. Lovely to see you.
Hi, Richard. Yeah, really great to be with you in your studio. This is fantastic here, isn't it?
And we've got 3 cameras operating just for the fun of it today, which I don't always do. But as a special guest like yourself, it's nice to have a little bit of making it nice and polished.
Amazing. Yeah, this is going to be multi-technicolor, wonderful, a wonderful show.
So now, for those people who don't know, we've had David on before, a couple of times actually.
Yeah.
And we did a walk and a talk, and we did one over Zoom, I think, originally, which was good fun. But today I thought it would be nice to have you in the studio because there's so much has happened.
Yeah.
Not all good, unfortunately.
Oh my goodness, tell me about it. Yeah, there's every day there's something, isn't there?
Absolutely. So let's go back. Let's go back to where you are and who you are, and just to remind people that you a small party, or you represent a small party, or the creator of a small party, the Heritage Party.
Yeah.
So what does the Heritage Party stand for?
Yeah, well, I started the Heritage Party in 2020 because I thought we need a socially conservative party in the UK, and we don't have one.
Right.
Something that just represents normal, old school, traditional conservative values that everyone can agree with, you know, that just make common sense wherever you are in the political spectrum. So that's why I started the Heritage Party, and we've been growing since then. So we represent traditional family values, free speech and liberty, controlling our borders, national sovereignty, self-sufficiency in skills and energy, and just doing common sense things like building our energy structure and infrastructure rather than knocking it down for all kinds of ideologies.
It is the sort of thing you expect parties to do anyway, but we have seen actually all of what you've just said, which is common sense, taken off the manifestos.
Well, you know, politics should be dull and boring, really. It shouldn't be full of people who are trying to create chaos, which seems to be what it is at the moment, because all the parties you've got in Parliament, you know, I call them the uni party, and a lot of people are starting to use that phrase because they understand the fake Conservatives, Labour, Lib Dems and Greens have all coalesced around the same agendas, the same policies, which are acting against the interests of ordinary people and businesses.
Yeah.
And we just need to stand against that. I mean, all we really need to do to restore our country is undo all of the bad legislation that's been put in place over the last 40 years.
So where does this bad legislation come from? Because it hasn't come from the people.
It certainly hasn't. I mean, it's come from these parties that are there. But, you know, as if you study these things, you know, there's the World Economic Forum.
Yes.
And then the head of that is Klaus Schwab, who has actually said and admitted, we have infiltrated the cabinets of all the governments around the world, or penetrated is the word he uses, which is a little bit more rude, but there we go. I don't like to think about that, but he has in certain, to a certain extent.
Yes.
So you've got things like the World Economic Forum is a body and institution that we can see, but then there's generally, you've got the whole movement and ideology of cultural Marxism, which has started a long time ago, but it's grown and grown and grown. And the idea is to get people to infiltrate all of the institutions in the West in order to undermine them, corrode them, and invert their values. And of course, the institutions are educational institutions, media, but also political institutions and political parties. So whereas you would have had the Conservatives before conserving things, now they're doing the opposite. They're actually destroying things. Whereas Labour would have supported the labouring man, they're not supporting the labouring person at all. They're actually going against what normal working people would think, you know, to the extent that they can't even define what a woman is anymore. You know, so the Greens are not green because they want to pave over the countryside and turn it into wind turbines and solar panels. They actually want to cut down trees so they can put up solar panels. I mean, that's not green, but they say they're green.
And of course all that 5G as well.
Right.
Which is, you know, we keep seeing all these trees being shut down because the 5G signal it can only travel a small amount, so you need tons and tons of this stuff.
It's horrible. In so many local areas, you see trees being cut down, and
Yeah.
what the reason for this is. They're not honest about it, but this is one of the reasons, I think. Yeah, as you say.
And yet at the same time, because the argument is we all need this net zero policy in which trees are supposed to be pulling in the carbon. I mean, their argument just keeps falling apart at each time you quiz it.
Of course, because trees are good.
Yeah.
If you care about the planet and you care about the environment, you want more trees. You want to protect trees. You don't want to knock them down.
Yeah.
But this is for what is it for? To reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So you knock down the trees, and the ideology says, oh well, actually, if you cut down a tree, but then you burn it, you're not actually producing carbon dioxide because you can plant another tree and in 100 years it will grow.
Yes.
So that reabsorbs the carbon dioxide. But they don't talk about all of the damage to habitats and wildlife and the
Right.
soil and all of the other things.
But-
When all these people are doing it, are flying around the world on their private jets, spewing out more carbon dioxide than an African farmer does in a lifetime.
Yes.
So, so the whole thing is completely hypocritical.
But then at the same time, if they say it's okay to burn the trees for the reason they want it, they want to come along and take my wood burning stove out because they don't want me to have an independent fuel other than the one that they're pushing, the electric fuel, which God knows how you're going to charge enough of these, get the electric from the wind farms and the turbines and the solar panels.
Well, the latest idea is that we'll charge up your electric cars, and then at times when you need more energy, you will discharge your electric cars and put the energy back into the grid. People are actually seriously promoting and propagandizing this idea. It's just absolute nonsense.
So what is the answer to all of this? We know that at some point there's going to be an election.
Yeah.
And I know viewers will know my opinion on the government as a system of administration, it being a dead entity corporation in which, we're not really able to influence it as individuals. So we've got to have a party or parties that are going to make the difference. Yeah. You stand for so much common sense. I mean, anybody reading your manifesto, I can't imagine anybody disagrees with what you're saying. It's just whether they believe you can get in.
Yeah, that's right. And we do have a lot of wonderful people who've joined as members, who are standing as candidates and who are being active in their local areas, setting up branches and going out campaigning. Last year now, 2023 is last year now, we had 65 candidates standing in local elections, which was fantastic considering it was only our third year of standing in elections. So we're just trying to build the party and get as many candidates to stand in locals and also the general election coming up this year. But we need more people because, I know people are very frustrated with politics as a whole at the moment. And I don't blame people because they see the Conservative Party are not conservative. And I know people are completely incensed with them. Their vote has just collapsed in all the by-elections they've had. But the thing is, you need to join and support and vote for another party that is actually going to give you the common sense that you want back in the country. So that's why I've created the Heritage Party to do that, to challenge the system.
Take me through then. If people say they don't want the Conservatives, Labour looks threatening that it's going to go a bit more extreme than the Conservatives. The way the system works at the moment, is it possible that if everybody votes for the Heritage Party, will the Heritage Party get in?
Of course, it's possible. The probability is low, but there's always the possibility. So there's never no hope. There is always hope. And I know people say to me, you're never going to do it. I say, no, we can do it. And it just needs everybody to jump on board and support us.
Yes.
I think our manifesto is something that 10 or 15 million people could look at and say, I really like that. So if you like the manifesto, come and join us, come and stand. And then, you will open the opportunity for more people to vote for us because I can't do it on my own, which is why I need a party. On my own, I can just stand as an independent in one area, which could be good.
Yes.
And you may get in as a councillor or an MP in one area, but you need a whole party that covers the country, with a sort of unified manifesto so we can all work together to actually restore our nation. So that's what I've been trying to build over the last last 3 years, with the help of a lot of wonderful people who've come on board as well.
So is it a confidence thing that people need to feel actually there's a chance, so it's worth putting our vote in that box to you, rather than thinking, oh, they haven't got a hope in hell, so therefore we'll have to hedge our bets. We don't want them, so we'll go and maybe do one of the others.
Yeah, well, that's momentum, isn't it? So we need to get momentum, and we're still. Well, for us, it's still early days, but we are, pushing in every way which we possibly can. I do as much media as I possibly can. I know a lot of our activists are going out, knocking on doors and doing street stalls on a local level as much as we can. But yeah, we need momentum. We need to do more, as of course we do. But when people see that you have a chance of winning, that's when people jump on.
Yes.
So it's like at the moment, we're growing, but we haven't reached exponential growth. When we reach that point of exponential growth, then loads more people jump on and say, they can win. Well, we'll join them then. But I need people to help me to get to that point. And I'm relying on people who watch shows like this and who are in our part of the sort of society, if you like, to come and join us. But otherwise, you'll just have the situation where people go, well, I don't like the Tories, so I'm voting Labour to keep them out, and they'll be worse. Or I don't like Labour, so I'm going to vote Tory to keep them out, and they'll just carry on doing the terrible things that they're doing at the moment. So
and just flipping between those two parties, which I mean, another thing that I've said on the channel is that each time you go to an election, you've either got the Conservatives or the Labour, depending on who's flipped over, going with the begging bowl, saying, oh, we're going to be hard on crime, we're going to do the borders, we're going to do the schools, we're going to make sure the police this, and I'm 60, so I suppose in 40 years I've been relatively interested in politics, and as I've got older it becomes more apparent that how important it is. And yet in those 40 years the NHS seems to be deteriorating, the police has deteriorated, the borders, we're letting anybody who wants to come in who's got a rubber dinghy and that's all fine. Every area of this so-called progressive, sophisticated, cultivated society in which we're supposed to be at the top of our game, everything's gone downhill thanks to these two parties.
Those are just three areas you mentioned, and all the areas that you could think of where you can have a policy, things have gone downhill. But healthcare. I mean, look what's happened in the COVID era. You know, I mean, people are now not getting treated if they got cancer or they, need a knee operation and so on. They have to wait so long to get things that you could have got, routinely before. Things are just getting worse and worse. You mentioned police and crime. Well, we're not safe anymore. I mean, London, I used to live in, I first lived in London in the 1990s. It was known as the safest large metropolis in the world. You would very happily go anywhere in London, walk around, and you feel like, well, I'm not going to get stabbed like you might do in New York.
Yes.
London used to have a reputation as being a really lovely place to live and very safe, but that's completely gone down the tubes.
Yeah.
And, immigration you mentioned as well. Well, all we need to do is control our borders, but there's mass illegal immigration. And there's mass legal immigration as well, which people haven't asked for. I mean, we've got what is it now? 745,000 a year net, 1.2 million gross legally coming into the country because all of the new schemes that has been opened up under Rishi Sunak
and what about the people who live here?
Right.
Who are actually paying the taxes.
No one's asked the people who live here, do you want mass immigration? Well, actually, they have been asked many, many times, and everyone's always said no, but they keep on going and doing it anyway.
So is the problem that we have a system of career politicians, that people who have not really existed in the real world and have not been to Eton or to these exclusive schools and have run smaller businesses than just being the chairman of something or other and all of that. Is that the problem? We don't have people who are actually experienced in real life and have seen people suffering because of whatever it is, whether it's damp in the walls, not enough money to pay the things, children starving, the effect of bullying, and so on and so forth.
Oh, there's very, very few people who have had real life experience and a real working man's job, or working woman's job, or just had, been a housewife, for example, whatever. A lot, so many people, they go to Eton, and they go to Oxford, and then they go to Temple, they do law and whatever, and then they go to Parliament, and that's their progression. Or they go and work in an MP's office straight from university, and then they get selected to be an MP, and they join the parties very young, and they go up the greasy pole, and the parties actually select people who will be compliant.
Right.
So the selection process nowadays for Labour and also for the Conservatives is looking for people that you would call woke, who are going to push, be completely compliant to the woke agenda, but completely compliant to the climate agenda, be totally on board with that, and the World Economic Forum's programs, Agenda 2030, the UN, and also NATO's programs and the war program. You're not going to get anywhere in the Tories and Labours as a new candidate if you don't support all of the wars that we seem to be getting involved in. Which I'm totally
why
against.
are we involved in these?
Well, it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, the Ukraine situation has got nothing to do with this country whatsoever. I mean, there's no need to be involved in Ukraine at all. Indeed, we could have stopped the war from happening by saying, well, we shouldn't be supporting a puppet regime that wants to bring Ukraine into NATO and the EU. We could just, try and find a way to work with Russia so that we can come to an amicable solution where it stays neutral.
Yes.
And that would have stopped the war from even happening. But even after it started, there were two peace agreements laid on the table. I mean, Zelensky and Putin met in April 2022. They came to a peace agreement brokered by Erdogan in Turkey. And then Boris Johnson goes over and speaks to Zelensky. I don't know what he said is in private, but of course, the next thing he'd backed out of the peace deal. And the war continued for another 2 years with the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of people.
And none of us,
so bad.
None of us who are paying the taxes that are paying for all of this were consulted.
No, well, you had mass propaganda at the time. I was calling it out. I was against it from the very beginning. And when a new narrative just starts, all of a sudden everyone was putting up the blue and yellow flags all over the place. And if you didn't agree with it, then you were called Putin's puppet, or you were called a new Chamberlain or something. This was the kind of smears that I got and other people got who were against.
So does that mean
war.
if you put up the blue and yellow, the flag of Ukraine, that you're acquiescing, you're telling the government, actually, we agree with what you're doing? Is that effectively what's happened? We've been so influenced that because people change their blooming avatars and they haven't thought about anything.
Well, we've had one thing every year, haven't we? It's 2020 it was lockdowns.
That's right.
2021 it was injections.
Yes.
2022 it was Ukraine, and now 2023 it's Israel.
Yes.
And I'm trying to stay neutral on the Middle East, and I'm not pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. I just don't want people to be killed.
No, exactly.
But that's not good enough for some people.
No.
People
are throwing. People will know I've not spoken about the Ukraine business or even the Middle East, because at the end of the day, it's the innocent people who concern me, who haven't asked for any of this. They just want, like most of us, to be left alone, to get on and have a nice life, bring your kids up and have, where you can, some enjoyment for being born on this planet.
Right, yeah. And without all of the people in government, who are, I don't know what links they have with the military-industrial complex or the big pharmaceutical companies who are making lots and lots of money out of this. I'm sure that some people do have some links with them,
I'm sure.
And they're the ones that are making the decisions. But ordinary people don't want to get involved in fighting a war that's nothing to do with us in a country 3,000 miles away.
Yeah.
And I think we should just stay out of them. That's my opinion.
So one of the things I've been talking about on the show quite recently, having read something from now I've mentioned his name downstairs when we were chatting.
Belloc.
Yes, Belloc and Chesterton. They came up with this book called The Party System. And in the party system, this is in 1920. And they said, hold on a minute, everything is upside down because we're getting stuff from the top and we then vote on it. But he said, surely it's the people. The people are are the ones who say, look, we're paying this. We've put you into power to do what we want. So we should come up with the ideas, tell our members of parliament, the representatives, what they are, and then the executive, the government, effectively go and do it. And if you don't do it, we'll go and get somebody else who will. And 100 years has gone by, and we're still in this. In fact, it seems worse because we've got so much top-down stuff that nobody's asked for digital ID, CBDCs, surveillance, and the whole and the net zero nonsense. And yet we're all acquiescing and saying, "Oh yeah, no, what a good idea." Well, we're not saying
people
that.
are manipulated so much by the media, but then you've also got these nudge units.
Yes.
And this is a massive thing that the governments do and the media do, where they have all the behavioral psychologists behind them, thinking of how can they nudge people, program people, control people's thoughts without people even being realizing that they're being controlled and being manipulated to support a certain position. You know, this is the propaganda that comes. You know, I've mentioned those things that have happened over the last 4 years, like injections, for example, you know.
Yes.
You're manipulated to take one, and you're manipulated to support it or not to speak out against it with all of these smears and then all the positive advertising for it. You know, and that's just one thing. But it can change. There's always hope that it can change, because we do have the power as people. We still have a democracy, however hard it is. It is hard, I know. We got the first past the post system.
Yes.
So it makes the two big parties with all the PR and all the money, it makes it easier for them to sustain them in positions of power. But we can change it, you know, either as independents, going and standing as independently in your local town, whatever. But I mean, I think we need a party which just represents common sense and is just going to turn the values that have been inverted the right way up again. So that's why I created the Heritage Party. But it can happen. It just needs everybody to get involved.
But I mean, you say it can happen, but I mean, you know, if we look back in history, is there a time in history when there was a party that was really hopeful that we could sort of say, actually, that was the turning point, but somehow it went wrong?
Well, you know, I stood in the 2015 elections. I stood for UKIP back then because that's who I was with back in 2015, you know, fighting for the referendum and for Brexit.
Yes.
And there was so much hope that they were going to break the mold of politics. But just in the last couple of days of the campaign, it flipped, and the votes flipped back to the Conservatives because they played a blinder. They had an incredible PR guru who's called Linton Crosby. He's well known in PR circles, and he just put out the narrative 2 days before the election: if you don't vote Tory, or if you vote UKIP, you're going to get Sturgeon and Ed Miliband. You're going to get Labour and SNP. And that scared all of the people who were thinking we might have a change back into voting for the Conservative Party, or like all the fake Conservatives. So again, that was a manipulation that happened, but that nearly broke the mould of politics in 2015.
So do you
I
think
think the energy's still there to do it.
So you think we could break that mould now, or will the same thing happen again, in which there'll be another blinder played by the...
well, they will try. They will try. They certainly will. But, you know, I think there's so much frustration with the two big parties at the moment, Tory and Labour. They are going to lose their voters in droves. I mean, you've seen 8 by-elections or whatever in the last year or two where the Conservative vote has just collapsed. And Labour have won those seats, not because they got any more votes, but because the Conservatives just haven't come out to vote.
Yes.
They're looking for something else.
Yes.
And Labour are not attractive. But, you know, by default, they won those by-elections. But I think there's incredible room for a new challenger party to come in this time and sweep the board.
So when do you think the election will be called?
Well, I called it I didn't call it myself. I wish I could call the date, but I called the prospective date as November the 7th. I think it'll be November the 7th. I could be wrong, but I just think, you know, that's the same week as the US presidential election.
Oh, wow.
And so the US elections are usually on Tuesday every 4 years, so it's going to be on November the 5th. So ours are usually on a Thursday. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's on the 7th of November, but the noises coming from Parliament are changing every week.
Yes.
You know, it's going to be November, then May, then October, then January, then May, then October. So you just don't know.
And I guess they can't go much further. later in the year? Because by December, that's it. They've got to
call it by 5 years of when the last election was.
Yeah.
So they've got to call it by the 12th of December, I think. So the last possible day is the 25th of January 2025.
Right. And I mean, I have heard that people say that the Conservatives generally hang on to the bitter end.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think they'll wait to the very bitter end, because no one wants an election campaign over Christmas.
No, that's
but
true.
they will call it probably, so it is in November, I'd imagine, something like that, or maybe even December, before Christmas. I don't know.
So that is quite a long time then. Well, I say a long time. It's probably
for me,
it's probably
it'll
nothing,
just go like
it?
that.
No,
it's so much to do.
I was going to say. What are you calling then for? If let's say you've got that time, you've got 11 months or 10 months, I suppose, technically, because we're recording this very close to the 11th, although it's a bit earlier. So that gives you 10 months before November. What can you do in that time?
Yeah, we just carry on with what we're doing. I've been building the party for 3 years with a lot of great people who've joined us. We just want to increase our membership. We need to get more funds to come in, because you need a lot of money in politics, unfortunately, to run a campaign and to do leaflets and, support people who are doing, things actively over the year. First of all, we got the local elections coming up they're going to be on May the 2nd. So we know that. We'll be standing in many places around the country for council elections. We'll be standing in the London Assembly elections as well. If that happens in May, we'll do that, and that'll be a springboard to then jump into the general election campaign. Obviously, summer will be a little bit quieter because people go away on holiday, but I'll be planning our conference, or we'll have an annual conference in September, and then hopefully we can then just step right from that into campaigning for the general election, if that's in November. So that's if everything goes to plan. Yes. But that could all be scuppered, because Rishi Sunak could come out tomorrow and say, we're going to have an election in February. It's like, whoa, he could do that.
Absolutely. So let's talk about things that might happen this year. A few predictions, not necessarily about politics, although politics might be driving it. People have been saying, there's going to be a much bigger awakening to what's been going on, all the different psyops that we've had. And then others have been saying that not only are people going to awaken to the great harm that's happened, but that it's going to be very turbulent. There might be more psyops, or there might be solar problems from the sun and blackouts, and the internet will go down, or perhaps there's another a pandemic of some description, or so. What do you think?
Well, there's all of these things are possible. I mean, the mass coronal ejection is the most interesting idea, because these things happen.
Yeah.
But they're very, very rare and few and far between. I mean, another pandemic. There might be a real one this time. There might be something.
And how would you know?
Well, you would know if people are actually dying in great numbers. I mean, the pandemic of 2020 wasn't a pandemic.
No.
The flu figures just exactly inverted with COVID, weren't they? Flu went down to nothing.
That's true.
COVID went up.
But that's interesting, because you say if people die en masse. Now, what if those people are dying because they took something the government persuaded them to take a couple of years ago?
Yes.
And the effects of that are now happening, and we keep seeing in the media loads of people who are unfortunately dying early. And what if that's then misinterpreted to be the new pandemic?
Well, they're talking about, an increase in turbo cancers, aren't they? Which is a completely new phrase, isn't it? Which obviously, these are things which are happening as side effects of the injections. I mean, to me, that's absolutely obvious. And, the worrying thing to me is people actually said at the time of the lockdowns coming out, they had actually tested these mRNA vaccines on animals, on ferrets, and they all died within 2 weeks of actually receiving or contracting a real wild virus.
Yes.
And with humans, then that extrapolates out, because we're larger animals with a bigger body mass, that it would extrapolate out to something like 3 to 5 years. So it could be the case that we're going to see people who've had the injections now start to die on a greater number. I mean, I don't like the thought at all, but it's a possibility. But then they will try and come up with some narrative and pretend that this is some new virus, when actually mostly it's coming from the injections.
And so, I mean, I'm reading that people are not taking up the boosters, anything like.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. And do you think twice? If
Even
you are...
normies are realising now.
Exactly. So if they then come out with at turbo speed another something magic solution that you just need to take, I really don't think people will want to risk it, will they?
I think the vast majority of people have had it now. The lockdowns are not going to work again. Another pandemic, another virus is not going to work again, unless it's something that actually is real and people can actually see, oh, well, there's lots of people like getting blotches on their skin and falling over in the street, with that. And unless it's something like that, people are not going to believe the narrative.
And the trouble there is a bunch of truthers are going to go, nah, that's not real, I'm not taking it. And when maybe they ought to, and then that wipes out all those people who are questioning things.
Oh, yeah.
That's the problem, isn't it?
You don't know, is it? Sometimes you can go overkill on this when something is true, and then you can look so much into everything and not believe anything at all.
Yeah.
But there is some truth somewhere.
There's got to be, hasn't there?
Yeah.
So what other things? I mean...
Obviously the other big thing that is coming up is a financial... crash or collapse of some kind, because our fiat currency system, with the amount of debt that we've got all across the Western world, it's unsustainable now. The US,
the dollar is dead.
Yeah, they've got 34 trillion of debt now. It's going up by 1 trillion a year just in terms of interest rate payments. So their national debt is actually climbing, I think, by 4 trillion a year now at that rate. I mean, the dollar is not going to survive. Neither is the pound. I mean, we've passed 100% GDP to debt to GDP ratio, which is with a point of no return.
If the monetary system collapses and we've got whatever trillion it is, 22 trillion, what did you say it was?
In the USA, it's 34 trillion.
Right.
I think in the UK, it's something like 2.5 trillion pounds. Pounds. Which is over $3 trillion, yeah.
Right, good old promissory notes, fiat currency. But what happens then if it all collapses? There's this debt that we can't pay, and suddenly the monetary system isn't there for us to pay it. Did they wipe the debt? Do we go, oh, we'll have a nice clean break and we'll start with Bitcoin or buttons?
Well, I think that is the plan. The plan is to just wipe this and bring in CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, as a new system. Yeah. This is the great financial reset that the powers that be want to bring in.
Would we still be in debt, though?
I don't know how it will work, but there will be some kind of, jiggery-pokery done in order to get the system to carry on working and for them to keep on exploiting the system. So I don't know the ins and outs of what will happen to the debt, but if they do bring in a new system and a new reset, maybe that's what they would do.
Because the thing that's always bothered me is there's this debt. We keep being told, I don't know who it gets paid to, but whomever has lent us this money...
the bondholders, the government's bondholders. But
there's always money for war. We always seem to find money for war. We found money for the furlough scheme.
Right.
We seem to find money for everything other than anything that's beneficial to you and I.
Well, if we didn't spend money on war and we didn't spend money on the furlough scheme and overseas development, whatever that is...
And putting up loads of foreigners who want to come in.
And migrant hotels and diversity officers and quangos, you would wipe... you would balance the budget, and then you wouldn't be increasing your debt anymore. It would be sustainable, and then you could slowly pay it back down.
And is that what you would do in
the
heritage?
Yes, of course. We would balance the budget. They talk about we've had a period of austerity in the country. We've never had austerity, because austerity is when you don't spend more than you take in.
Right.
So the only way the only two places the government can get money from is taxing you now, or borrowing money and taxing you in the future. So, neither of them are particularly healthy, not at all. But, taxing people now in the current account and not getting into debt is infinitely preferable to doing that and borrowing more money so you can spend and waste the money on things that are of no use to the people in the country. But this is what, Tory and Labour have both been doing over the last 40 or more years. So we need to actually have what you would call real austerity, which is just balancing your budget. So cut out all of these things that we don't need to spend money on: furlough, war, diversity, all of this nonsense, and just spend money on the things that need to be done, public services that we need, whether it's roads, hospitals, schools, these kind of things, doctors, dentists. That's what we should be spending our money on, not these highfalutin schemes. And levelling up is another thing. This is a new buzzword of this administration, isn't it?
I never quite know what
they're
that means.
levelling up everywhere, which means they're putting in all these ridiculous white elephant schemes all over the place. I mean, Littlehampton's not far from here. From where I live as well. I mean, I'm in the same district, in Arran district. They want to just ruin this lovely old, the green park by the seaside, which has been untouched since Victorian times.
Yes.
And they got plans to sort of turn it into some concrete space age, installation thing with kind of, oval tables and stuff, where it's just green and people can come and sit on the grass and enjoy it like they have done. Well, that is such a waste of money.
Yes.
And it's called levelling up. We're going to level it up to increase tourism. Well, they're not going to increase tourism. They're just going to put some money in the pockets of someone who's going to concrete over a green space.
Yes.
I think this is the kind of waste of money that we just need to get rid of.
And we've got too much concrete especially on the south where we are, along this coast. I mean, if you started, say, in Eastbourne and you go all the way to Southampton, I mean, there's so little spaces between all of that where there isn't build-up areas.
They're developing it like crazy. I mean, I drive along, drive along the road, the South Coast Road. I get the train along the South Coast sometimes via Hove if I go up to London.
When there's not delays.
Yeah, when there's not delays, exactly. Well, that's another story. but you see building everywhere, all the green spaces between the different, villages and so on are being filled in. They're being infilled with these horrible housing developments. What are they doing to all the green space here? It's horrible.
But I never quite understood who's buying all these houses. Now, I bear in mind, of course, there may be plenty of my viewers sitting in there going, excuse me, we've bought all of this stuff. Well, some of it. And that would be a bit of a surprise to me because you see so many of these houses. They seem to be quite unaffordable.
Yeah.
And they seem also relatively flimsy, I have to say. And there is a sort of, at the back of my mind, this sort of feeling, well, actually, in perhaps 50 years' time, when there's been this mass depopulation, which we fear is going to happen, they'll actually probably take all these houses down because it will be quite easy to do so because they won't be needed anymore. But
it's a mystery. I hear people all over the country say this. It's not just Sussex. It's Essex, Devon, Lincolnshire. Rural Lincolnshire, which you would think you would leave it alone because they grow food in Lincolnshire.
Yeah.
Great, wonderful agricultural land. Leave it for agriculture. Don't pave it over with housing developments. But things are going up all over the place, and people say in their towns, well, it's not for us. We're not going to live there. Why does a town with like 10,000 people get a big housing development of another 20,000 houses? Clearly, there's not going to be enough people in that town wanting extra accommodation, much extra accommodation. So who's buying it? Maybe people moving out of London to the counties, but then, who's moving into London to take their place?
Well, exactly. And you mentioned agricultural land, so let's just talk about farming, because we've seen what's going on in the Netherlands, and they're trying to get the farmers off the land. It seems blatantly obvious. They want these tri-cities, whatever they're called, which again is another sort of version of these 15 minutes crowding people in and just keeping them into this so-called ideal living. And then in Cornwall, I'm told that they want to basically get rid of all the farms in Cornwall. They want to rewild all the open spaces, but nobody's allowed to go into those rewilding spaces. We interviewed a fisherman down in Warsash, which is near Farnham, near Portsmouth and the Solent, and he was telling me that the farms are being bought up because farms are struggling, so it's easy to go there as a developer and say, well, we'll buy all your farm and build on it, and then some obscure place will have our set aside for the net zero thing, our carbon sequestering, what it's called.
Yeah, these new electric batteries, aren't they? They're putting the new idea is to put up battery storage facilities. So they get the idea, they'll get all this energy from solar and wind,
right,
and then they'll store it in these huge massive battery facilities, and then when the grid needs extra energy, like with the idea I mentioned with electric cars before, this will then discharge into the grid. But the thing is, you can have as many battery storage facilities as you want. It's only going to provide energy for a couple of hours.
Exactly.
It's going to be such a waste of space.
And I mean, the question is whether you can get all the battery materials, the cobalt and all of that, and of course, are you then just funding the slavery of the kids who are having to go down the mines?
Yeah.
But so go back to the agriculture. We need agriculture to grow food.
Right, yeah.
And there is this huge sort of thing, no, farmers don't worry about growing food. Well, what are we going to bloody eat?
Well, we're going to get our food from Morocco or somewhere, aren't we? Or Australia or New Zealand.
Or mealworms
that's the other
Bill
idea,
Gates'
which is
wonderful
horrendous.
Synthetic burgers.
Oh my goodness! No, absolutely. I mean, our manifesto says we want to aim for self-sufficiency in food, support our farmers, traditional farming. So we keep our dairy, we keep cows, we keep sheep, we keep growing vegetables and fruit in this country to try to provide a higher percentage of the food that we need for people to eat in this country. I mean, we don't. I think we only provide about 60% of our own food at the moment. I mean, I don't know the exact figure, but it's certainly not 100%.
No.
So we are reliant on food imports at the moment, which is not a good thing.
Where's the logic that if we're trying to save the planet, that you've got to import it from the other side of the world, where we can grow it here, and we have been.
Yeah.
All right, during the wars, we found that actually there we were importing 2/3 of our food, and of course then the U-boats were targeting the ships that were bringing it in, so we had to dig for victory and grow the stuff ourselves. And when these big crises happen, we suddenly go, oh, we've got to take back the responsibility, we've got to do it ourselves, and we manage it, and then we all get lazy again and go, oh, actually I'll have my strawberries in December when they're not growing.
Yeah, it's nice to have them in December, isn't it? I mean, you just get used to it. But this is a luxury, really. But I mean, you can have them if they're available, but we should aim to be 100% self-sufficient in food, so that if the worst comes to the worst, we're not reliant on imports of food. We're not going to do that if we are concreting over prime agricultural land for housing developments, for solar panels, for wind turbines, and for these battery storage facilities.
Yes.
I mean, they're all bad. Let's keep our agricultural land there for growing food.
Absolutely,
it's very simple.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Now you have a YouTube channel, and you go out there and you tell us what's going on, and you comment on all sorts of things, which is great to see. And I wish more people were doing that sort of thing in the political sphere, so you got to know people. One of the things you were talking about fairly recently, which I hadn't heard of before, is town boards. Now, of course, at first I kept thinking these are physical boards that are going up around the town. I thought, oh, they're putting in the wall already. But that's not what you mean.
No, these will be management boards for the towns. It's a new system. It's part of the levelling up agenda, which is completely transforming politics and how it's done in England. They're actually open and very honest about this.
So don't we have councils for that?
Well, we should do. We do have councils, but this is a new thing which is going to take over some of the power from the councils with these unelected boards. So
I was going to say, does it go to the people? Are the people now in charge?
The people will not have any say over who's on the town board. So the existing councils will appoint a chairman.
Right.
They will also appoint, they will be allowed one person from the police, one person from the local council, but then the chairman of the board, who is unelected and appointed, will then appoint the other members of the board. And the idea in the document says, well, this could be the manager of a local football club, or it could be the head of the NHS trust, or a local businessman or woman.
Yeah.
But the reality is, it's not going to be any of those people. It's probably going to be the head of the local lodge, or the head of a local property development company, or the head of a climate NGO, or the head of a refugees welcome NGO.
Yes.
They're the sort of people who are going to be appointed onto these town boards, who are pushing the globalist, climate and woke agenda. I mean, that's the reality of the situation, because we've got 8 councillors now in the Heritage Party at parish and town level, and they're doing a fantastic job. But what I hear from them is rather than, them engaging in what you'd expect councils to be engaged in, which is fixing potholes, looking after parks and libraries and charities for all elderly people and so on, they're constantly fighting the woke diversity agenda, and they're constantly fighting the climate agenda. Our councillor Sean in Kent, he told me that across the council's desk in the meeting was a local climate action network that wanted to go into the local school and teach the children how they should give up meat. They need to eat less meat for the climate. And so, he's able to fight this on a local level. But, this is the kind of things that councils are engaged in, because you've got these four parties which are a uniparty that are continually pushing this agenda. This is why we need people to be, in the Heritage Party, to go in to get elected onto councils. But then this plan coming from Michael Gove's Levelling Up department circumvents democracy.
Right, because you can't get on the board. So you can go and complain to the council, but you can't get on these town boards, which are then going to be basically making the big decisions, presumably.
Yeah, but they're going to get a £20 million budget, for the 55 towns where they're going to be implemented.
Right, and then once that's happened, it's only 55 towns. Presumably, it'd be rolled out.
Yeah, I imagine they'll want this everywhere.
It's a great success. We've basically bulldozed everyone. We've locked everybody up. They can't come out of their houses. They now do everything that we say. It's such a great success. We're going to do the rest of the country.
Yeah. I imagine so. But, this goes along with the whole devolution agenda. Government in England is being completely transformed. In London, there's a London mayor, Sadiq Khan, who I questioned for 5 years on the London Assembly because there was an awful lot to question. But, what they're doing now is they're implementing regional or metro or county mayors all over the country. So this is the plan. By 2030, we're going to have 40 little Sadiq Khans, one for every county in England, who will be, basically the head of their little fiefdoms, and have total power over police, health, crime, skills, and whatever other things the government gives to them, power over in their areas. So power is going from the local councils in one direction to the town boards, but in the other direction to these county regional mayors. The thing is, they are democratically elected, but the fee to stand in the election, rather than being free, is £5,000 or £10,000.
Oh my gosh!
So you can't afford.
Okay.
So a normal person, or
and that's just what the fee to just to
it's
stand.
the deposit. It's the deposit to stand in the election.
Which you lose.
If you don't get over 5%, you lose your deposit.
Right.
So if you're a challenger party, you got to find a hell of a lot of money to stand in these elections.
Yeah.
It's not possible to stand in all the elections.
No.
If you don't have a huge amount of money. So again, that favours the older parties that have got more money, that are more established. So it keeps them in power, and they get their elected mayors who've got control.
So how is it that somebody as lovely and cuddly and marvelous as Sadiq Khan is still in power? I mean, he's the most hated man in Britain.
I know, but he's Labour, isn't he? And the thing is, I don't know about London, because even the Muslims don't like him.
Right.
I went round campaigning in 2021 in the election, and they're like, we can't stand him because he's bad for our businesses.
Yeah.
And they really hate how he's all on this LGBT agenda and so on. But the thing with London, unlike most places in the UK, is it has electronic counting machines.
Right.
So I went to the count, and you literally cannot see the marks on the papers. So you cannot be sure that the results that they announce are anything like the results which are on the paper. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's impossible to say one way or the other.
And presumably that's a system that could quite easily be, again, rolled out so that nobody knows whether democracy is being carried out.
Exactly. We've got to make sure that this electronic voting, electronic counting does not expand. Actually, we shouldn't have it at all.
Yeah.
At the moment, we only have it in London and Scotland, in Scottish elections, not for Westminster elections.
Yes.
But, I'm sure the powers that be would like to roll it out everywhere. I mean, we do still have paper ballots and people hand counting them, which is really, the only way to be sure that you can see the marks on the paper, because You can go in as a counting agent and look at the votes, and then if there's a massive discrepancy, you can say and you can call it out.
Yes.
But when the papers are going through the machines 20 a second, you simply can't see them.
No.
It's not possible. So, who knows what the actual result of the London election was in 2021.
Absolutely. Well, another theme that I've been talking about is something in which, actually it was not my idea at all, but somebody said a campaign in which you have none of the above. Now, I know there's a guy who's been trying to sort of get that on the ballot so that you can say, I don't believe in any of these candidates, and it becomes none of the above means, I guess, go away and do it again. But my thought was, never mind it being on the ballot, is if really and truly the people who there that you really don't want to vote for, you just don't believe in the system at all. And I'm wary of the whole system, and my viewers will know my views on the system, that actually the House of Parliament and all of it should be bold. I can't even say it. Bulldozed down. Bulldozed down.
I wouldn't bulldoze the beautiful Parliament building.
Well, it does seem to be crumbling of its own accord, and you do wonder if it's all the bullshit that's going on.
Well,
in
there is a lot of nonsense going on,
and
in
it's all just going. Do you know what? If we just crumble down, maybe it'll go away.
That's where I might disagree with you, because I totally understand the sentiment, but I want to get in and change it from the inside.
I understand.
I don't want to knock it down. I want to change it democratically.
Yes.
But I do understand the sentiment. That people are so fed up of it, and the idea of a none of the above box to vote for. I mean, to be honest with you, I go to the counts and, I've heard this before and say, well, at least then they'll know, the people counting will know that someone has this opinion as opposed to it. But they don't care. The people are counting are just, they're going through that as quickly as possible. And then counting, the candidates.
Are they reporting that back and saying we've had X many spoilt votes?
Well, they will have to count how many spoiled votes there are. And, I see people draw, appendages on there every time, You get that every single time. People think they're so original, whatever. But, you get that. But, I mean, the people counting have just seen it so many times. Yes, they don't care. They don't even register.
They've got their job.
They put it in a box and then they count the spoiled ballot papers and then they just count them up and they give a tally like they do for everybody else. They don't read the messages on the spoiled ballot papers.
Well, I haven't got time, I don't suppose.
No. They want to finish off and they want to get the results out as quickly as possible.
Yes.
Yeah. So they don't take, they don't register, this person says this person has written a long note about democracy, I'm going to read it and take it to heart. That doesn't happen.
No, right.
Sorry to spoil it, but that's just the reality of the count. So it's not going to make any difference, unfortunately.
So as we come to the end of this lovely interview, and I've enjoyed it immensely, here we are, let's say on the week before the election, whenever that is, what would be the one thing, the one policy or the one idea that you've got that is unique to your party that you think will sway people? What's the most important message at this time?
I think people can deal with three things,
right? Okay.
in their head at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's immigration, it's protecting our children, controlling our borders, protecting our children, and stopping Agenda 2030. Those are the three things that we're going to mainstream in our campaign.
And I'd like to deal with the children as well, because we know that there's a lot of terrible stuff going on with the children. But before we get there, do you think many people are aware of Agenda 30, Agenda 21?
They're not, but I think if you talk about energy, people know that energy prices have gone up through the roof.
Yeah.
And they see the carbon-based energy infrastructure being broken down and demolished. And we're saying, let's not destroy our carbon-based energy infrastructure. We will rebuild our coal, oil, gas, petrol and diesel infrastructure with small modular nuclear power so that we have cheap, continuous, plentiful, reliable energy, which we're not going to get if we knock them all down and try to rely on solar and wind.
No.
It's madness. And I think everybody will understand that. We need enough energy to provide power to our homes and our economy. Yes. Very simple.
Yes.
And we had that in the past. That's one of the things that made our country great and made our economy roar, and turbocharge our economy. We can do that again. But if we go down this route of chasing energy sources that don't give us any energy, it's madness. Even a child can see that.
And for me, the other thing is that you're putting all your eggs into one basket. It's got to be electricity and nothing else. and then you've handed the knob of control to whoever controls electricity. Whereas if you've got a whole different plethora of energy sources, if one goes down, you've always got something in the background in reserve.
Yeah.
And why would you want to give everything one monopoly so that there's somebody controls the price, somebody controls how often you can use it, and all of that? That seems a madness. Let's go on to the children then, because we've seen in recent times the films like The Sound of Freedom. We know with the Epstein stuff that there's a lot of paedophilia going on, and names and people are being distracted on who's on the list and all of this sort of nonsense. But just talk about, for me, where the place where kids most likely, it seems to me, are in danger is in schools and the stuff they're teaching them.
Isn't that terrible? Because parents send their kids to schools and you think they're going to be safe there and they're going to learn positive things which are going to enrich their life. But you go to a school now and the chances are they're going to be addressed by 3 or 4 activists every day. And some of them actually, it is their mission to queer the children, to queer the kids. That's what they, that's what they say. They open about it.
Yes.
And parents have got no idea that this is going on. But we need to make sure our kids are protected. There's a lot of parents now who do know what's happening and they homeschool their children.
Yes.
But that's not an option for everybody. If you live in a flat in a big city, it's not an option for you.
And you've got to go to work and pay for the bills and everything.
So we need our schools to be a safe place for children. And so what we would do is implement a Hungarian-style law which says that children must be protected from sexualizing propaganda. I don't care whether it's heterosexual, homosexual, transsexual. You let kids be kids. Why are you trying to sexualize kids in any way?
Yes.
Particularly at primary schools, but, even also at secondary schools. They're still children. They shouldn't be exposed to things, when they're coming into a time of life where, you need to make sure that they're not exposed to things that are going to lead them down the wrong way. But, primary school, there's absolutely no need at all to teach children about gender ideology or different types of families or different types of relationships, whatever. Let kids be kids.
It's being backed up by the media as well, by children's programs and all the stuff that you see on social media. So it's legitimizing all of that. And there is no alternative for the kids. They just believe it because that's their world they're in.
Right. And even the church schools, even the Church of England schools are doing it. You've got people going in now, this is cultural Marxism. It's insipid. It is trying to infiltrate everything and invert everything. So, it's very shocking. You used to say, well, if a church school was if a school was a church school, a child would be safe. But some of them are great and they do protect their children. But you have some people who are deliberately targeting church schools, foundations that go into them, deliberately to try to invert their values and bring it in there as well. But it's so wrong, and there's no excuse for it whatsoever.
No, and that's very much a central message. That goes back to what your party is about, the heritage message, the traditions. We never used to do that. And growing up as a kid in the 60s, I feel so privileged when I look back at what I grew up with and what kids today are held inside. They're fearful of going out with the predators everywhere, apparently. And it's safest to be on the computer with the EMF and the screens and the digital nonsense. And you just, it becomes absolutely laughable. But it's a minefield for parents.
Right, it is. What is very strange, and very, very sad as well, is you have African parents come here to the UK thinking that the UK has got these wonderful, excellent standards. And some of them are saying, I'm going to send my kid back to Africa to go to school because they're going to have more discipline, they're going to have more of an academic education, and they're not going to be exposed to all this LGBT stuff.
Yes.
And it's Africans say that they're better off. Kids are better off in Africa than here.
Yeah.
I mean, what an indictment of this country.
Well, exactly.
And
of course, the irony now would be is if some British people are saying the same. Well, we'll send them off to Africa as well, because our system is just so corrupt.
Right? Yeah, maybe.
It's been an absolute joy, David, to have you on the show. The hour has flown away, unprepared, no notes.
Has it been an hour?
It
Amazing.
has been an hour. It's been wonderful.
Yeah.
And of course, we'll have to get you back as we approach the election. The Heritage Party, people can obviously find that by just Googling or putting it into a search engine, any old search engine, and you'll find it. What would you like people to do?
Join me, please. Join the Heritage Party on heritageparty.org. If you become a member, you don't have to become active. It really helps me. It helps the party to continue our operations and to support our candidates. But if you are interested in getting involved actively in politics and standing to be a candidate, you can apply on our website as well if you're a member. So heritageparty.org.
There we go, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching. It's lovely to have David here. I will be back with more monologues and wonderful guests, but from the studio, from David and myself and me fiddling with buttons on the camera. I hope that was all right. Thank you for watching. Thank you, David. It's been
It's been
an
really
absolute
great.
joy.
Yeah.
Link to the party will be in the description, of course. And from David and I, thanks for watching. Goodbye.